This is Off Script with Trish Glose, intimate interviews and conversations with interesting people. And in front of my microphone today is Josh Dorcak of Moss and Ashland.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Welcome. We're going to talk a lot about Moss. You guys have been open just a few weeks, right?
Yeah, we're coming on our 5th week this week.
Awesome.
So.
All right, we're going to talk a lot about Moss a little bit later. First of all, where are you from?
I'm from the Bay Area, California. So I grew up in Cupertino, Silicon Valley. Totally different landscape than we have here.
A little bit. Cupertino is that's the land where you buy an iPhone and it shows up on your iPhone.
The land of the internet.
What was it like growing up in the Bay Area?
It was great. You know, I think there was lots of like multicultural families. So I remember going to my Japanese friends, my Pakistani friends, so all the households you went over when you were a kid were different. So I thought that was, looking back, it was great.
Okay, and Dorcak is what?
Czechoslovakian, and I've lots of Polish blood in me too.
Okay, and you were telling me your grandparents met in Chicago?
Yeah, so they met in Chicago, and I guess, I don't really know, but I guess back then the story goes that the Czechs and the Polacks didn't really get along.
What?
And so they had to move to California to kind of run away and get married.
Okay. Tell me about your childhood. What was that like?
So a pretty big family. My dad had 3 brothers, and both sets of grandparents lived, very close to each other.
Oh,
so
nice.
it was lots of family, lots of food. My dad's side of the family definitely embraced eating together at the dining room table, doing big family gatherings, all focused kind of around food.
Do you have siblings?
I have one older sister.
Okay. And so getting around the dinner table and eating, was it always a lot of people, or was it really just immediate family?
Mostly immediate family. Like, my parents were divorced, so my dad made a pretty big point, looking back. It was pretty cool that he kind of always just had us come and sit down at the table, but then usually it was Monday night dinners that the whole family got together at my grandparents' house, and it was just a big kind of cookout.
Were your grandparents big cooks?
I wouldn't say big cooks. I just think they grew up in that era of, growing, having a garden, and they had 3 boys, so I'm sure they, they cooked a lot.
Right.
So yeah.
What was some of do you have fond memories of any sort of food that you would make or your dad would make?
Well, my father would usually just kind of go all out with ingredients. So we go to the store and he'd buy live lobster, and we just go home and cook it. Not saying it was cool to do.
Yeah.
I don't know if we really cooked it right or respected the ingredient to the most, but
right.
But lots of, just the typical barbecue chicken, taco salad, kind of just these flavors that you kind of I look back on now, I'm like, oh my gosh, that reminds me of.
Oh, nice.
Whatever.
A little nostalgic.
Yeah.
And you were put to work in the kitchen.
Well, yeah, I always had a job, whether it was starting the barbecue, the Weber with the little chimney and tearing up newspaper. That I love that one because it involved fire. And then cutting bread, cutting the garlic bread, or preparing that thing, or whatever the task was. I always had something to do, which is.
And that started your, I don't know, I don't want to say that started your love for cooking, but you were.
I think it was instilled,
Yeah.
Then as I kind of grew up and watched, as TV came more into the picture of growing up, I used to just love watching this Iron Chef Japan on the Food Network when that first started. And I was just obsessed with it. So seeing the action and the ingredients and the knives and the all the flair that they did, that's when it was just kind of whoa, this whole chef thing is a really cool thing. So that kind of was my first insight into the environment.
Right. What were you like in high school?
I don't know if I remember high school. No, I was really big into skateboarding. I was not into academics at all. It just didn't click. And the more I realize about myself, it's if I'm not into it, I am so checked out that it's just I'm not even a fun person to be around, when I'm like that. So school, academia, like not at all on my wavelength. I really liked being outside and doing that kind of thing.
But culinary school did click for you, and that came after.
That came after, maybe I grew up a little bit. I was 18 when I went, so I think when I was a senior in high school, like it kind of, the work clicked. It was like, oh, all I got to do is the work. And then the culinary school thing happened, and that was where it was like, oh my gosh, I really understand the purpose behind everything. Mm-hmm. Everything is a little bit more like black and white. You do this comes out of it, or you do this wrong, this happens. So yeah, it was a little bit more realistic for me to.
You just fit there. I mean, it was the process that.
Yeah.
And I guess what was it about culinary school that you were just like, this is what I'm meant to do?
I think there was like some strictness to it, it was like the uniform, mm-hmm. all these things that like I don't respect too much now, like in my own kitchen, mm-hmm. but like, it was like this respect to what you were learning and all these other kind of, I don't know, everything seemed to matter.
Yeah. And then everybody talks about going to culinary school and learning the mother sauces, and mm-hmm. that's sort of a big deal. But I mean,
I don't. Yeah, I mean, I think it's very. I'm not going to diss the education and like the background of it. I don't really ever. I don't see the relevance mm-hmm. in too much of it anymore. At least with what I'm doing. I mean, of course, it's probably very important for other people's avenues, but like for me, it's like, no, it's more about breaking the rules and developing my own rules.
Right. Okay. And then after culinary school, what happened?
After culinary school, jobs happened. Working for
mm-hmm.
free happened.
A lot of working for free.
A lot of working for free. A lot of dishwashing, kind of like just to get in the door and have something to do to prove that you can work. Traveling happened. I think traveling, as well as working in other top kitchens, was probably like, I mean, I'm most grateful that I had the opportunity to do all the traveling that I've done, and focused mainly around food.
Okay, so what was the first restaurant you worked at?
First restaurant I worked at, technically, I mean, like ever, was my father's. My father owns a golf school in the Bay Area, and at the golf club thing. Mm-hmm. I washed dishes for a day, and I was like, this sucks, and I quit. And then the first real one, I think, was a place called Sauce that was in Hayes Valley in San Francisco.
Okay.
Where I would go in, I would scrub dishes from, like, they were stacked up on the floor. It seemed like from the night before. I don't even know. It was just awful. And then I would go through and pick through produce and then set up. And I was just there all the time. Like, just really, I would, now looking back, I was probably really annoying. Like, what is this young kid always doing here? But
and then after culinary school, you got a job in Oakland, right?
Yeah, I got a job in Oakland at a place called Pearl Oyster Bar, which was like right near the university, or right near Berkeley, in Rock Ridge. And kind of worked this raw bar. It was focused around oysters and like just top quality seafood, and that like exposed me to what is quality and like how much of a difference that makes. Mm-hmm. And then also like this real like line cooking where it's like it's busy and you have to figure it out.
Right. Where'd you go from there?
From there I went up to Napa and worked at this place called Silverado, and I did that for 6 months, but I really didn't like living up there, so I moved back to Oakland, and kind of got my old job back a little bit, and then came up here essentially.
Yeah, you were in Arizona at the time?
Yeah, no, I came back here for a year. This is like a number of years ago, and then my partner and I moved to Arizona so she could finish school. I ended up getting this amazing job at this restaurant called Binkley's. There's like this huge waiting list of cooks that like wanted to go do this thing. He, has this resume, and I guess, it was like a desirable place to work. I ended up not really liking it. I mean, I learned so much, it was one of these jobs where it was like a 13-hour work day. Mm-hmm. It was just incredibly intense. There was yelling, there was like belittling, there was the whole gamut of like what what some of these places are like.
Sure.
The molecular gastronomy stuff with all the fancy white powders, and like a prep list that was just impossible every day. So it was like draining. And so I learned a lot about like the most important thing was like what I didn't want to ever become, and or the mentality that I never wanted to carry.
Really?
Like screw all that stuff, you know,
Yeah.
like it's really not that important, you know?
Wow.
And then too, it was just like, I don't work well in this environment, you know, it's too stressful. I like, where's the Zen? This is not a safe place. This is just a place of fury, anger, and ego.
The opposite of no stress in the moment. It was every stressful moment.
Every stressful moment.
Okay. What brought you to the Rogue Valley?
Well, a girl.
A girl.
And then I really just fell in love with like just the landscape, and coming from a city and growing up in a city. Sure, I got out and I knew what wilderness was, but actually like seeing a valley and where people lived in the close proximity of where the town was, and the way the air smelt, and like just the copious amounts of space that you could see, that really kind of caught my attention.
Well, you've told me the story. This is a little deja vu, but you've told me the story. You were driving up here. It was like in the middle of the night in November.
Yeah.
November.
Yeah, like, and I had never really driven that far north out of the Bay Area or California. And it just seemed to like, okay, you get to this point where like the woods start, like by Shasta.
Yeah.
And it just seems like, oh my gosh, like I feel like I've been driving for 12 hours. Where is the next town? And then, you know, I'm expecting Ashland to be something maybe a little bit bigger, or I don't know what I'm expecting.
Right.
And it's just like, Ashland, 3 exits. And it's like, nothing is, it was like really late. So obviously nothing is open, but so dark, just like dark. So that was my first experience coming to Ashland. I really didn't even know where I was.
And you were saying just what hit you really big was the smells.
Yeah, just like that cold winter air, where it almost like, I thought it just smelled like the color blue, where it's like, what does even that smell like? It smelled like snow. And
Is that a big, I mean, are smells a big thing for you?
Yeah, no, I think I definitely, you know, olfactory memory of that, you know, experience and that memory, you know, it's like they're the most powerful ones. So those are the ones I try to, you know, really focus on, at least when I'm cooking food.
Sure.
You know, I'm tasting a lot, but I'm more smelling everything from, you know, people eat with their eyes first. And then, but like, that's almost like you're smelling while you're looking.
Yeah.
And that's almost that initial instinct of like, is this good or is it bad?
My grandmother has a huge cast iron pot, and every time we heat it up, it smells like her pot roast.
Yeah.
Whether we're cooking pot roast in it or not.
Yeah.
But there's something about that. It feels safe.
Yep. Yeah. No, there's security, and like people, I guess, I don't know, people think that, or I'm trying to be a custodian to, I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. Like the whole part of cooking food is to bring comfort. And oftentimes I push the envelope just with like being creative or different ingredients or anything like that. But boil it all down, there is this level of like, what can it bring you back to? You know, like where is something that you can identify with? And that's to me the number one challenge of cooking food.
Right. It's the movie. I don't know if you've seen Ratatouille.
Yeah.
So when he eats the ratatouille, he's instantly taken back to being a child.
Yeah.
It's very sweet. And food, I think, really does do that.
And I think with the food that we're doing with Moss, too, it's like, it's indicative of the time and place within the season. So if you're a person that gets outside, gets on a trail every once in a while, or just like is noticing what's happening like around, it's more trying to invoke those kind of like, oh my gosh, I just saw that today. Like, oh, like I was just over in Jacksonville and I smelt like the wild elderberry blossoms, and like this is it right now in front of me and I get to eat that. So like there's a part of like maybe not so much like distant memory, but more of like, you know, real life experience.
Right now.
Yeah, like right now in this valley, and it's, you know, hopefully that can be captured, but like maybe sometimes it's overlooked.
You were in Ashland around 2006, correct?
Yes.
And where'd you work at that time?
A Muse restaurant hired me first, or I applied there, and Eric and Jamie hired me as like, you know, I was just working garde thing, which is salads.
Thank you.
And I ended up, you know, it was a great learning environment. They were, you know, they're both from, or Eric is from the Bay Area, and he had, you know, it was lots of similar kind of like philosophies at that time. and I ended up working there for about 6.5, 7 years, and became their head chef. Kind of like early on to my tenure there, and yeah, like learned more about like the local farms, and yeah, it was just a really good experience to have in this area.
Where did you get the idea for Moss? Because Moss was actually a pop-up before
Yeah,
it is what it is now.
Moss has been in my head for a number of years, maybe like 5 years. I have like a collection of restaurant concepts that I've thought of and like wanted to do, and I remember like thinking of restaurant names like years and years ago, and it was just like Moss, like more. I was like, that sounds cool,
right?
But what is it? You know, it's not Spanish. I don't want to do Spanish food,
Right? Because Moss in Spanish is more.
So, and it became there's more of like a belief system, and or just, you know, it is what it is. You know, it's asking me to be a lot more than what have been in the past, of a more of a creative, more from, you know, obviously the diner showing up and like trusting this menu, trusting me to serve them something that's, you know, satisfying and that tastes good, that they won't dislike, you know? Because it's a blind menu. You don't really go to Moss. We don't post a menu in the window. We don't have one online yet. You know, hopefully it's kind of this modern way of like, you know, using this Instagram and social media platform to kind of like keep the followers up to date on things via picture.
Right.
And instead of like, hey, like here's some print, because when it's in print, it doesn't make any sense. You know, if you read
Hold on, I got it right here. We have a few: fermented and roasted turkey kumquat avocado, warabi morel, and chicken head sauce. That's my favorite. Artichoke with caramelized malted whey, wild onions, goose yolk, and fresh cow's cheese. Those are just a few things that have been on the menu recently.
Yeah, those are recent. And like, so the wild onion one is really cool because, you know, those are coming from in the Cascade range above Grizzly Peak right now. The fresh cow cheese, we experimented with making cheese with koji, which is a whole nother podcast.
Oh, yay!
And then we serve it with this goose yolk from Willow-Wit, and we then serve it with ants, which are army ants from up in the Green Springs. And ants have this, like, you know, formic acid in them, so it's like when you eat them, you have this, like, it's like a shot of lime, like just a crazy thing.
Ants.
Yeah, and you know, it's weird-ish.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's like that's what we have here. Like those are actually ingredients that we have that are edible and that like add to flavor. So
is the philosophy behind not posting a menu or not having it anywhere where people can see it is because you want them to not be, I don't want to eat ants, and not have to like experiment or like open their mind a little bit?
Maybe that's part of it. Maybe there's like some insecurity with like, maybe if we posted it, people wouldn't come.
Okay.
I think that's probably some bit of truth, but also it gives me and my business partner Luke, like a little bit more breathing room to be creative, where it's like we don't have to follow the script that we're telling everyone that we're going to follow. You know, it's kind of like a spontaneous show that we're well rehearsed in. You know, and that's why I think.
Yeah, and you really do use a lot of things that are right here in our backyard. The chicken heads, for instance.
Like those. Yeah, I mean, we're just trying to be. You know, we're trying to focus in on what's sustainable and like how can we really support the local farms, which a lot of restaurants do. And there's like this whole theory behind, like we need to buy the whole crop and everything like that, and that's all groovy. But you know, sometimes it's just that's a lot of stuff that. How do you commit to that? And so with the chicken head thing, Forage and Plow Farm in Little Applegate, he was like, you know, they culled all their meat birds and they used everything else, you know, and Brock, the owner, was like, hey, I got these chicken heads. And I was like, oh, sweet. Yeah. Like, I'll buy them, you know, of course. Let's like make the birds like this. They're all being used, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought the chicken head sauce was awesome. You know, it's just like a really rich chicken stock that we just reduced down. So it's not like you're eating like visible brains and eyeballs and tongues and all this other like things that the head kind of maybe brings to light. It's just bones and cartilage, just like feet would be or anything
exactly.
like that.
And is it more the people who come to Moss, should they kind of trust your process a little bit?
Yeah, no, they should come and learn about it. That's the whole thing, because you sit down, you have the option of sitting down at a counter, which is just like you are, more than a hand reach away from what we're doing. And it's the dialogue. There's a story behind every dish, and I love talking about it. And
That's awesome.
then that's part of the experience.
Yeah.
It's like you're not just given a menu and then given 10 courses without the guidance, from us. And we don't have a service staff, so it's all us.
Local chef Braden Hitt, I told you this, from the pop-up Over Easy in Medford, said he, first of all, gave huge kudos because he went to one of the dinners, and just, we were talking about it, and I was like, some of the things on the menu, I don't even know what they are. I've never heard. He's like, same here.
Yeah.
I haven't either. But I think that comes into what you're saying. It's this learning experience.
Yeah, it's learning experience, and it's also, our real goal at the end of, at the end of Moss, or maybe hopefully it never ends, but is to really like help, maybe not help define, but to bring to light, more of a Cascadian cuisine base. Like we're in a very unique area, very different from the Willamette Valley, and then the San Francisco Bay, the two most popular places to live on either side of us. And I think we are unique, and I think that should be brought to the table of nationwide.
And the hospitable side of it is big for you.
Yes. We don't turn tables at Moss. One, I appreciate when I travel, in European countries, and you just kind of like sit and you chill, and you're like, man, I just had a beer, and they're not kicking me out, and like I'm taking up maybe 4 seats because I'm at a table for 4. It doesn't matter, because you're their guest, and that's what I want Moss to always be, is just like, no, you're coming over into like, you're in my realm, and I want you to be as comfortable as possible. And so we don't turn the table. So when you get a reservation or you buy a ticket, it's your spot for the night.
Nice.
You can hang out and talk and
drink.
And,
right. Is that a throwback a little bit to kind of family growing up and having dinners around the dining room table?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think it's instilled.
Right.
And it's, I mean, but also part of it is just how negative is the experience when, you're sitting at a table, you've had a great meal with some friends, and then you get the bill, it's like the bill is like this, like, dun, 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 like, it's all over, you have to split up the check, figure out the tip, and it just seems like it's maybe it's not so negative, but it's
an end.
It leans on the end of like, oh man, like, and I think that maybe it's part of like being a kid too, when you're having so much fun, and then your parent comes and you're like, okay, we got to go home, and it's like, come on, like, why does it have to stop, and I think that's why we do the ticket thing. So it's, you pay in advance, you can supplement a wine pairing, sake pairing, or whatever. But, if you get there and you're like, I want a glass of wine, and that turns into another glass of wine and a Japanese whiskey, it's like, there's no bill even. We just put it onto the reservation that you prepaid on. So it's just like, keep the party going, and, we'll make sure you're okay.
That could be dangerous, I was just going to say.
Like, it's our job to make sure that you leave safely, and you remember what you've just experienced. But, I really like that, and I that's what I want to promote.
It's almost like you kind of forget that you did pay, and you're really just going to a buddy's house and you're having a really fantastic dinner.
I think it changes the experience, truthfully. I think it for the better. And I think it'd be great if like more restaurants kind of switched to the model. And it also changes the industry of, restaurants are hard to run.
Yeah.
They're like notorious for going under. And if you think about the volatility of the ingredient that you bring in, it's all perishable. So if you can like at least secure a deposit from the people that are saying they're going to come in, they're more likely to show up and like eat the food and like do the thing, thus making the industry a little bit safer. You take away the variable.
No, that makes sense. Is it important to you to be different in Ashland or in the Rogue Valley?
No, it's not that important. Like,
because you do stand out. Moss does stand out.
Yeah, which is great that it does. I'm like so humbled and like, but it's humbling in a way where it's like I'm not trying too hard to be that different. I just happen to be
That
different. It's not a goal. I don't wake up every morning and be like, how can I be different than everyone else today? I'm not trying to make a statement. I'm not like that as a person.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just really cool that it's like working out, and I'm every day that someone like signs up for dinner,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, holy cow, like
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe this is like even happening,
Awesome.
So it's a very humbling experience, and I'm happy.
When you're not working and when you're not fermenting and doing all your sciencey, nerdy cooking things, what do you crave? Like what kind of food do you either want to make or you want to eat or
Well, usually I don't really want to make anything,
Right.
but I mean, with my family,
Mm-hmm.
my family of 3, we kind of sit down and like decide like for the next week like what flavors we want to have.
Okay.
So sometimes it'll be like, let's do Moroccan, let's do this Japanese kind of thing, or let's just do like Americana, like whatever food. But if I'm left to, if I don't have my son or my fiance is out of town, like it's just white bread and mayonnaise.
Right.
It's like it's just like get me out of the door, and like I just want to get into the cooking environment, which is like my kitchen, because like my home kitchen is like not anything you might think like, oh yeah, he's a chef and he has all these like fancy things. It's like, yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
like
That's actually true with a lot of chefs.
Yeah,
because they don't cook when they're home.
you can't bring it home, or else it's like it'd be crazy. It'd just not be good.
And you've been in a lot of kitchens, and even with Moss now, have you ever gotten burned out, or have you ever gotten to that point where you're just like, ugh, I just don't want to do it for right now?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. It's not a good time. I think that's like on the peaks and valleys side of like just being a human, and like having, you're like, oh, this is great, and then it's like, man, it could be such a drag sometimes, especially when it's, I don't know, it's like, I think working, that's why I don't want to work for anyone anymore. It's like, it's too much stress to like, you're the chef and it's up to you to make it go well in a way.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, shoot, like, can't make everyone happy all the time.
But you still have this great passion for it.
Yeah, no, but I'm very lucky, personally, that I just know that this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Nice.
And I'm just trying to define a better way of doing it that's a little bit more healthy, less anxiety, less of all the like negative things that kind of go along with cooking food for a living.
Okay. We're going to wrap up, and so I'm going to get to my final 3. Best advice you've ever been given?
This came from this guy called Kevin Binkley from Binkley's in Arizona. Even though it was a little bit intense, he, when I was getting a job, he was saying, or trying to file through the line of people that the best chefs know all aspects of the restaurant, so you should take the front of the house position, even though if you don't want to, because that'll just give you better insight. So basically, just know your business and know it well on the insides and outs of it.
Right. And this is coming from, well, you were a dishwasher for a while, so
yeah,
you get it.
And I now am doing the front of the house stuff too, the table service, and it's all very important. And it's just to be a chef that's like says like I just cook the food and like that's my job. It's like, well, take a step back and actually think about what the industry you're in.
Right.
It's a lot about it.
Because you and I were talking too about, you could have easily been in a restaurant where you're sort of hiding behind the stack of plates, and now you're very much out in the open.
And there's nowhere to hide at the restaurant. They're literally nowhere. And that's good. That's good for me. I'm like kind of like, I don't want to be the limelight all the time. Like it's a lot of it's like, I just cook the food and it's good and that's all I need to worry about. But now it's like, oh man, I'm watching everyone's first impression.
That's true. So yeah, good point. If you were ever to leave Southern Oregon, what would you miss the most? What would bring you back here?
I would have to say the landscape of what the bounty that we're actually in, the budding scene of something that could be really amazing in the future. I've heard a lot of people say, we're the next Napa Valley of, whatever. And, well, no, we're not going to be the next Napa Valley. We're going to be a totally different thing,
We're going to be Southern Oregon.
Yeah, that's why it's like the Wild West here. It's like we can define what we want to be. We just have to go for it.
Awesome. And if you were given a last meal and a last drink, what would that be?
Meal would be this. I mean, it's very
Courses, of course.
Well, like a multi-course meal would be great, but I mean, it would have to be like steamed clams, with like really nice white wine, Normandy butter, really nice baguette, like a really crusty, just sourdough kind of baguette, and then like vintage champagne probably would just be like, that'd be chill.
Okay, so chill. And Normandy butter is?
French butter from Normandy, like super just
Makes
like
sense.
cheese almost.
Yeah, okay. So, and then tell everybody about Moss. If they want tickets, they can go online.
Yeah, so you go online, exploretalk.com/MAS, and that's like, all the information about the restaurant, the calendar, the experiences that you can sign up for. And then it's definitely like, we're a small space, so if you're coming from somewhere afar, I wouldn't recommend just showing up, because oftentimes we either have no more seats or we're to our capacity of what we can handle for that night.
Okay.
So it's definitely important to kind of get a ticket in advance and plan around it.
Yeah, make it a date, make it a plan. Perfect. Josh Dorcak, thank you so much. If you're listening to this podcast on iTunes and you like it, please subscribe, rate, and review. That helps other people find us. You can check out the video portion of this podcast at ktvl.com. Just click on features, then off script. Josh, thanks so much.
All right, thanks.